There's a type of relationship that doesn't end with a breakup, because technically, it never began. You text every day, you know their schedule, you know what makes them laugh, you know the exact way their mood changes when something's wrong, but if someone asks what you are, suddenly the answer becomes complicated. Not dating, not friends, not strangers, not together, and not free. A situationship is usually described as something more than friendship, but not quite a committed relationship. And that little gap in the middle is where the confusion lives. Dating apps didn't invent this feeling, but they gave it a name. And in 2022, Tinder even reported that young singles were treating the situationship as a valid relationship status. So why does something so undefined feel so intense? Stay until the end, because the last reason is the most uncomfortable one. It explains why the person who wants no label often has the most control. At first, a situationship can feel strangely perfect. There's no pressure, no heavy conversations, no official expectations. You get the excitement of being wanted without the responsibility of defining what it means. It feels modern, mature, relaxed, like you're both above the old rules of dating. You tell yourself, we're just seeing where it goes. And that sentence sounds harmless until you realize that where it goes can become a place where nothing actually moves. The psychology of a situationship begins with ambiguity. Ambiguity is powerful because the brain hates unfinished stories. If someone clearly says, I don't want you, it hurts, but at least the mind has an answer. If someone says, I like you, but I'm not ready, or I don't want anything serious right now, while still acting emotionally close, the mind doesn't get closure, it gets a puzzle. And puzzles keep attention. You start reading everything. The delay between texts, the tone of a message, the way they looked at you last time, the fact they remembered something small, the fact they disappeared after being affectionate. Nothing is neutral anymore. Every tiny detail becomes evidence in a case you're secretly trying to solve. Are they scared? Are they using me? Or am I asking for too much? This is why situationships can take up more mental space than actual relationships. A committed relationship gives you a container. A situationship gives you questions. One study on romantic uncertainty found that people can become more attracted to someone when they're uncertain about how much that person likes them. Not because uncertainty is healthy, but because uncertainty makes the person harder to stop thinking about. That's the first trap. You don't just want the person, you want the answer. The second trap is intermittent reinforcement. In psychology, intermittent reinforcement means a reward doesn't arrive every time. It comes unpredictably. Sometimes you get warmth, sometimes distance, or sometimes they make you feel chosen, but then suddenly you feel like you imagined the whole thing. And because the reward is inconsistent, the brain tries harder to get it back. This is the same basic principle that makes unpredictable rewards so hard to walk away from. If someone was bad to you all the time, leaving might be easier. If someone was good to you all the time, you'd feel secure. The situationship lives in the middle, where the good moments are just powerful enough to keep you hoping, and the bad moments are just unclear enough to keep you doubting yourself. You don't leave because of what's happening now. You stay because of what happened once. That one night they opened up, the one message that felt sincere, or that one moment where it seemed obvious they cared. The mind saves those moments like evidence, then uses them to explain away every moment that hurts. This is where hope becomes expensive. A situationship often doesn't ask for commitment, but it still takes emotional rent. You check your phone more, act casual while feeling anxious, pretend you don't care about labels, but secretly you're waiting for a sign that you matter more than the situation suggests. And the hardest part is, you may not even feel allowed to be hurt, because how do you grieve something that was never official? If they pull away, you feel pain, then shame for feeling pain. You tell yourself, we weren't even together, as if the heart only attaches to official titles. But emotionally, the body doesn't care whether the relationship had a label. It responds to closeness, consistency, intimacy, memory, and hope. If someone becomes part of your daily nervous system, losing them can feel like withdrawal, even if the outside world calls it casual. That's what makes the situationship so psychologically messy. It creates real attachment inside an unreal structure. The third trap is the illusion of low risk. At the beginning, No label feels safe because if nobody defines it, nobody can fail. Nobody has to be rejected directly, and nobody has to admit what they actually want. So you tell yourself it's easier this way. But avoiding the conversation doesn't remove the risk. It just moves the risk inside you. Instead of one honest answer, you get weeks of guessing. And instead of one clear rejection, you feel small rejections over and over again. The delayed reply, the vague plan, the shift in energy, the way they act close in private but distant when it matters. Because none of it is dramatic enough to count as betrayal, you keep minimizing it. And this is how people slowly abandon themselves. You stop asking for what you want because you're scared the truth will end the connection. You act cooler than you feel, and you become grateful for crumbs because crumbs still feel better than losing access completely. A situationship can make you negotiate against your own needs. You wanted clarity, but now you're calling clarity pressure. You wanted effort, but now you're trying to survive on potential. You wanted to feel chosen, but now you're pretending you don't need to be chosen at all. That's not emotional maturity. That's emotional shrinking. The fourth trap is fantasy. In a real relationship, you eventually meet the full person, their habits, flaws, moods, limits, and choices, and even when that's uncomfortable, reality gives you information. In a situationship, there's just enough intimacy to imagine a future, but not enough commitment to test it, so your mind fills in the blanks. You don't just fall for who they are, you fall for who they could become if they healed, if they were ready, if timing was better, if they finally realized what they had with you. That's why almost relationships can feel so romantic, because reality never gets enough time to interrupt the fantasy. But potential isn't a relationship. Potential is a story your mind writes when the facts aren't enough. This is where the power imbalance begins, because the person who wants less usually controls the pace. They decide when it feels close, when it becomes casual, when the door opens, and when it shuts. If you ask for more, they can say, "I told you I wasn't looking for anything serious." And if you pull away, they can return just enough to restore the connection. Sometimes no label doesn't mean freedom for both people. Sometimes it means one person gets flexibility while the other person gets uncertainty. And uncertainty becomes control, even if nobody planned it that way. A situationship doesn't just make you question them, it makes you question yourself. You wonder if you're too emotional, too needy, too sensitive. So you act calmer than you feel, reply later than you want to, and say, "all good," when it isn't all good. Modern dating often rewards the person who seems least affected, so you perform detachment. And slowly, you adapt to less than you need. You start calling anxiety chemistry, inconsistency mystery, and emotional unavailability depth. Until one day, peace feels boring, clarity feels suspicious, and consistency feels too easy. The nervous system that survived confusion starts mistaking confusion for love. The final trap is that a situationship can become a place to hide from real love. For the unavailable person, it offers intimacy without surrender. And for the anxious person, it offers hope without final rejection, which is why it's so hard to leave. You're not only attached to the person, you're attached to the position they keep you in, close enough to hope, far enough to avoid the truth. If someone wants your attention, loyalty, patience, and emotional energy, but they don't want the responsibility of clarity, the relationship may not be undefined by accident. It may be undefined because the undefined part is serving someone. So maybe the question isn't, what are we? Maybe it's, what am I becoming while I wait? Not every situationship is bad. The problem begins when one person calls it casual while secretly hoping it becomes serious. Or when one person uses ambiguity to avoid responsibility while still receiving devotion. So don't only ask whether they like you, ask whether the structure of the connection is kind to you. Do you feel more secure or more confused? Can you speak honestly? Or does honesty feel like the thing that might make them leave? Because love doesn't need to be rushed, but it shouldn't require you to disappear. Maybe the most powerful thing you can say is, "This is what I want, and I can't keep pretending I don't." Sometimes the end of a situationship is not the loss of love. Sometimes it's the return of self-respect. If this made you think, subscribe to keep discovering your inner self.